Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, peace and blessings of God be upon all of you. Welcome to the fourth Interfaith webinar hosted by the Open Mosque. This month, we're dealing with the issue of charity. Is charity something that endangers paternalism and prejudice, or is it something actually a force for good? And there will be four speakers, each clearly projecting their own perspectives. We will listen to all of these four speakers in sequence, and then we will open up the floor, so to speak, for discussion, comment, criticisms, commendations, and so forth. So let me introduce you to the first speaker. The first speaker is our revered rabbi from Israel, Rabbi Miriam Berkowitz, who was born and raised in Montreal, Canada. She earned a BA magna cum laude in international relations from Harvard University in 1993, and an MA and a rabbinic ordination from the Schechter Institute in Jerusalem 5 years later. She served as assistant rabbi at Park Avenue Synagogue in New York for several years, and then worked in Florida as an adult educator. Presently, Rabbi Miriam lives in Jerusalem, where she's one of Israel's first accredited hospital chaplains. She founded Kashovot, Advancing Pastoral Care in Israel, in 2010 to place spiritual caregivers in healthcare settings, educating the general public about the role of chaplaincy and advancing the professionalization of the field. She is currently the international coordinator of the New York-based Spiritual Care Association, which provides mentorship to chaplains worldwide. Rabbi Miriam is the author of several articles and books, including Taking the Plunge, a practical and spiritual guide to the mikveh. She has also published in the Women's Torah Commentary, in Jewish Life Spirituality Handbook, Mount Sinai Journal of Medicine, and in the Journal of Pastoral Care. So I give you Rabbi Miriam as our first speaker this evening.
I could say halas, that's enough, it's embarrassing already. Oh, thank you so much to everybody, the colleagues and the guests. I'm really honored to be part of the group, and most of my daily life is very administrative, so it's wonderful to get back to the content of teaching and thinking about these meaty issues. And from being from Canada, multiculturalism and multi-faith is just a natural part of who I am, and I'm very, very excited to share this evening with you. So I did a little research about this, and here we will share the screen. Here, 1 second. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so here, 1 second. Okay, so so basically okay, I'll go through it quickly, and then maybe we'll have the time for some of the questions. So this idea of charity, it's really, the Hebrew word is tzedakah, which is really related to the word tzedek, which is justice. So, you know, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice, you shall pursue. It's not exactly like charity, like being nice because you want to help people, but it's dividing up the resources in a more fair way. And I feel like this is one of the real integral parts of the Jewish tradition. Now, when you get into Judaism, you know, there are all the layers of the Bible, like 3,000 or 2,000 years ago, whatever you think about that. And then the oral Torah and the modern. So there are many, many layers. You can't just say Judaism thinks this, but tzedakah or charity is a real basic tenet. So one of the ideas is the separation between tzedakah, which is more like financial, and gemilut chasadim, which is like acts of loving kindness, which is like everyone has to do, the young and the old, the rich or the poor, even burying someone after they're dead when they can no longer thank you or help you in return is considering the highest. And this is a picture of me with a nun at the St. Louis French Hospital, visiting and talking and, you know, even laughing, and visiting the sick is one of the things. And there's unlimited amount of loving gemilut chasadim that we're supposed to do as much as possible. So this is from the Talmud, which is written around the year 400 or 500. This is not a poor bride, it's just a regular bride, but I thought it was a nice picture of Russian couple from Montreal who came to do their wedding in Israel. So it's Ele Dvarim she'en lehem shiur is the first thing that you can just do more and more and more. And these are things that yield fruit for yourself and to the others. So honoring the parents, studying, visiting the sick, you know, helping people get married, and bringing peace between people, and studying the prayer. So and study is considered the most important because studying leads to action. But as we are focusing more on tzedakah, charity, then the rest of the presentation is about that. So really, even people who are recipients of charity are supposed to give to others. And you're supposed to give from between 1/10 and 1/5 of your resources. So the concept of tithe, 1/10, is from this. And they say if you give up to 1/5, it's great, very generous. If you give more than that, you're a bit silly, and you should be saving some for your own family. And yeah, and it's depending on what you have and what the person needs, is supposed to be some, you know, hatama, some synchronization. Here's a picture of Ruth gleaning in the field. So in the Bible, most of this tzedakah was agricultural, like leaving the corners of the field when you cut down all your crops so the poor could come and get it. Or like, let's say a few olives fell down or a few grapes fell down. Don't go back and pick up every last bunch, but let the poor come and collect for themselves. So there, and also the tribe of the Levites didn't have land, so they were supposed to get some you know, food and stuff from the other tribes, and then you would bring fruit to the temple to thank God for your you know, for your bounty. But most of these laws developed when the Jews were not in their own land, and so it wasn't like governments were doing all this stuff. It was like the individuals had to do it. Okay. All right. And then once, I guess, the Jews were dispersed from Israel and didn't have the agricultural stuff anymore, they're more like living in little cities and villages. They made up these communal institutions. So it's an overlap with Gemilut Chasadim, the acts of loving kindness. If you're making a soup kitchen, is it charity or is it loving kindness? Well, it doesn't really matter, because all these institutions came to provide for the needs. This is my daughter in the middle in a school play. I didn't want to take pictures of a poor and embarrass them, so I just took this cute little picture. So these are some of the community obligations that were taken upon the communities, big or small, for education. They made synagogue, they had a place to study, and the Bible mentions the widow and the orphan, I think, about 48 times. And also the stranger who lives amongst you, who isn't Jewish, but has accepted your sort of basic, you know, laws of society. lager hagar betochechem, that also all need to be included in this charity. Okay, so I'm not going to read everything. I can send this to you to share after if you want. But basically, the Bible says a lot of stuff about opening your hand, being generous, not exploiting the laborers, and make sure there's enough for everybody. And then later on, the prophets and the Psalms, it's like people needed a little convincing that you should really do this, so there were sayings like, tzedakah will save you from death. Or, well, nobody knows if it's for sure, but it was like a motivation for people, that good things will happen to those who are generous, and not only give money, but take the poor into your home, let them come visit you, have not to have the two classes in society. That was very important. So, and that this is the middle one's pretty powerful. The sin of Sodom was that they didn't help the poor and the needy. They were like closing the gates, and we have it, and we're going to stay in, and everyone else is outside. That was a grave misdeed. And then the Mishnah was written in about the year 200 by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. The oral law was supposed to be oral and add to the Torah and explain the Bible. But then when the Romans, were here and we were not allowed to study Torah, and their rabbis were afraid everything would get lost, they gave a special dispensation to write it down. So here are some sayings. First, give and have others give, and not just think, oh, they should give, but I don't have to. And the basis of all, Rabbi Elazar of Bartota said, everything really belongs to God. So whatever you feel like you're giving, it's not really yours. So that, of course, you should try and be generous. And then here's another thing from the Mishnah of how much actually to give, and that if people have enough, they shouldn't take advantage of that, and that the charity is collected by 2 people and distributed by 3 to make sure that the collectors are honest and they don't just stick it in their pocket. So if there are 2 or 3 people, they think that they'll watch over each other and be straight with it. And here's another thing, that it's even better to loan someone money or help them get into a business than just to give charity, because you want them eventually to become self-sufficient. And then if you live in a city, you have to start contributing gradually to take on that responsibility. Okay, don't worry, I'm going to get to the problems in a minute. Okay, so then Maimonides was a philosopher in the Middle Ages, and he kind of codified everything by category, like how the Torah is sort of in chronological order, the Bible, but then the Mishnah is more by themes, and then the Maimonides and also another book called the Shulchan Aruch just codified the laws by category, much, much, much more detailed. So he said here, even a poor person is supposed to give, because it's not just about the money, it's about your feeling of opening your heart and caring about people, and not just like pass someone on the street and not give them anything. It's not good for you and your own heart. Okay, and then clothes, and then then there's the questions like, should you check? Well, what if you think they're just taking advantage of you? And he said, for at the end, if he says, I am hungry, that's a basic need. So just go ahead and feed him. If he's asking for more fancy things, you should maybe do a little research, but not embarrass him. And also, like, I think talk to the person and hear their story, and treat them like a human being. So because of this class, I tried to think what could be the potential problems. Before, I had always just thought, oh, it's something to be so proud of. Of course, it's fantastic. So what could be bad about it? I guess people relying on tzedakah and not trying to work, and maybe like here near the Western Wall, there's a lot of people who ask for tzedakah in the marketplace, and like they probably, maybe they make more than they could at a minimum wage job. Like maybe they really do need it, but maybe they're kind of taking advantage of people's emotions when they're going to the Western Wall or something. So I can imagine that could be an issue. And then giving to your own and not to others. I have one slide about that, that first the poor in your own family, then your own city, and then your own country, and then the world. Like it's going out and out and out. So what if you just stick with your own and don't care about the, genocide in Rwanda and like global warming, and you only care about your own little thing? That wouldn't be good. And then just when we were speaking in the beginning, I understood that sometimes there's power, like there's a political party, Shas, that it's like a religious kind of Eastern Jewish Sephardic party. So they have like free lunches for school children. So that sounds great, but then they like want the people to vote for them. Or I suppose you could think of I don't know, I guess Hamas, they do a lot of schools and charities and hospitals, but then the people feel obligated to help them. So I definitely agree with Professor Talash that it shouldn't be with strings attached or with an agenda. It should just be, in Judaism, it's called lishma, like for its own sake. And then here, Rabbi Jill Jacobs is like a very social activist kind of rabbi. So I wrote to see if she knew of any potential problems. And she said to read her book, but I couldn't get it quick enough. But it's on Amazon, and maybe there might be interesting things in that book. There shall be no needy. So, so this is the quote about helping the people from your own city first, from the Talmud. And it's probably a natural human thing, but I just wanted to acknowledge that people might find that, discriminatory or racist or something. And yet, on the good news is that Jews give charity, let's say in America, at a higher level than the general population. And the more involved they are with their own religion, the more they give to all causes. And here, look at this. Out of the biggest foundations that give a lot of money, only 11% gave to only Jewish things. A lot of them support universities, hospitals, the arts, scientific research, or local community, and jobs, and downtown Detroit, or whatever they support. So I think the idea of tzedakah has become infused and ends up making people, care about their surroundings. So you might disagree with me, and I am willing to entertain that at the end, but let's see. Oh, I forgot to replace the picture there, sorry. So in summary, the Maimonides summarized these 8 levels of tzedakah, as you can read yourself, but the lowest on the ladder, the person who gives reluctantly and with regret, and like grumpy face, and like doesn't feel good about it. Then the person who gives graciously, but less than they should. You can imagine that what it's like. The person who gives what they should, but only once they're asked. Then the person who gives before being asked, that's very nice. The person who gives without knowing to whom he or she gives, although the recipient knows the identity. So you get a little bit of credit for it, but you don't sort of embarrass the person, and they don't feel obligated to you. Then the anonymous donor, that's a big thing, like anonymous, that's a big thing, because then you're not doing it to get the glory or recognition. Or the person who both you don't know who you're giving to, and they don't know who you're receiving, who they're receiving it from. And then the highest, as I said before, you help another to become self-supporting by a gift or a loan or finding them employment, like the thing, teach them to fish. So the last slide is this concept of there's the heavenly Jerusalem and the earthly Jerusalem. There's the ideals and the legends and the stories and the aspirations. And then there's the day-to-day messy, you don't make enough and your kid needs like braces and you're unemployed and you're stressed and like you're worried about the future and you don't want to give, 20% of your income away, and there's taxes and all that stuff, versus, aspiring to feel grateful for that whatever you have isn't really yours. It's kind of a gift from God, and trying to make the world a better place, and also feeling good when you do good things. So may we continue to learn and grow and improve the world. This idea of tikkun olam is making the world a better place. And thank you so much for your time and for the opportunity to do this learning.
Thank you, Rabbi Miriam from Jerusalem. I think you've given us plenty of food for thought. I request everyone to make some notes, and so we can ask questions and make comments at the end. Let me just tell you, we've got some good news and some bad news. The bad news is that Dr. Zurub from Tbilisi in Georgia, who lives currently in Leipzig in Germany, had to rush off to hospital to take his son for urgent treatment. So sadly, he won't be able to join us. That's the bad news. The good news is that now we have more time for everyone to speak and for discussion. So, but hopefully we'll have Dr. Zurub for another month, another topic. So give me great pleasure now to introduce you to Dr. Samuel Tuamasi Ankra. Now, for the past 3 decades, Dr. Samuel has served as a founding board member of a number of benevolent societies and organizations, including the Rural Water Development Program, Christian Reliever International Trust, Heritage Bible Institute, the Benin Bible Training Center, Hope College, and so forth. During his 32 years as Minister of the Gospel, Dr. Sam has spearheaded a number of philanthropic and other initiatives. Currently, Dr. Sam is president of Heritage Christian University College in Ghana. This is an academic institution highlighting core values of entrepreneurship, philanthropy, and ethics, and where every student receives scholarships contingent on their needs. Dr. Sam earned his master's in religion from Abilene Christian University in Texas, and another MA in theology and mission from Akrofi Christaler Institute of Theology in Ghana. He graduated from Biola University in California with a doctorate in education. Dr. Sam also serves as an adjunct professor at the Graduate School of Theology at Abilene Christian University, and he has presented papers at numerous international conferences in the US, Canada, Brazil, Nigeria, and Botswana. But I see South Africa is omitted from his list. I hope he will remedy that in due course. So without further ado, let us welcome Dr. Samuel Tuamasi Ankra for his presentation.
Well, thank you very much. And for the past 35 years, I have been privileged to serve in a number of faith-based organizations that are beneficiaries of charity. And at the same time, I have also been blessed to serve in a number of organizations that are themselves givers of charity. Therefore, deliberations on the subject of charity and its ramifications by such a broad spectrum of experts gives me great pleasure, and it also stimulates my inquisitiveness. So I'm very thankful for the invitation, and I bring you warm greetings from Ghana.
Thank you.
Let me take you to my slides. Yeah.
Share screen.
Yeah, but host has disabled, so I can't share.
Okay, hang on. I'll make sure you, I don't know who's disabled you. I haven't.
Yeah, that's what my host disabled participant screen sharing.
Make co-host, there you go. All right, see now?
Yep. Thank you. All right. So the theological viewpoints of the various strands of the Abrahamic faiths, namely Judaism and Western Christianity, Eastern Christianity, and Islam, all seem to suggest that the notion of charity is derived from God. And except for the question of who is worthy of charity and the form charity is to take, it appears all the Abrahamic religions fundamentally agree on the sacredness and the need to practice charity. So in this presentation, my aim is twofold. First, I will attempt a cursory description of the nature and role of charity, mainly from the point of view of the New Testament scriptures, the Hellenistic scriptures. And second, I will attempt to highlight on the morality of charitable or philanthropic deeds vis-a-vis the associated problems, and also attempt to recommend some remedies. So first of all, I want to talk about the nature and role of charity from the perspective of the New Testament. So the New Testament scriptures describe charity as a character of God and a commandment from Him. Classical Christian teaching characterizes the expression of an unconditional love to others as charity, agape, in the Greek. And that is precisely the point Jesus is making when he tells the stories about what we refer to as the parable of the Good Samaritan, and also the parable of the prodigal son, as the account of Luke's gospel carried them. The Apostle Paul also reiterates the same point in the way he described the qualities of agape, or of charity, of love, in 1 Corinthians epistle, the 13th chapter. And we can also say that the same idea is underscored in the Torah, specifically in the book of Genesis, where we observe that this world was created through God's charity, and it is preserved by God's charity. Therefore, charity affirms the goodness of God, the character of God's goodness. In the medieval times, Thomas Aquinas described charity as the foundation or root of all Christian virtues. Therefore, charity reflects the character of God, and he commands his followers, believers, to exhibit same. Again, the New Testament scriptures describe charity as a service to God and a duty for the believers. Though in biblical and post-biblical Hebrew, as Rabbi Miriam a moment ago mentioned, tzedakah connotes monetary or material help for the poor. I think it would not be overstretching the statement to say that the mission of the Messiah, as recorded by the prophet Isaiah in chapter 61, which Jesus alludes to himself in Luke chapter 4, is, in the broader sense, tantamount to charity. In other words, charity in its broadest sense should encompass not only the giving of monetary or material help, but in addition, offering redemptive services such as, and I quote from the prophet Isaiah, such as proclaiming the good news to the poor, proclaiming liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, setting at liberty those who are oppressed, and proclaiming the year of our Lord. So charity, therefore, can be summed up as an act of healing that we believers offer to a world that is sick and broken in sin. Again, I submit that just as the crucifixion was a sacrificial duty for the Christ, so the sharing of the believers' resources with the needy ought to be our sacrificial duty. Charity ought to be understood not as an option, but as a duty commanded by God to the giver. It follows, then, that the performing of deeds of charity by the believer, that means is that believers are engaging themselves in the mission of God when they perform deeds of charity. Now, if we take Jesus' statement in the Gospel of Matthew and Luke, the Gospel account of Matthew and Luke, where Jesus taught his followers prayer. And there's a statement Jesus made in that prayer where Jesus said, "Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses." Now, if we take that statement to mean a prayer request for God's charity, then the next phrase in that same prayer, "as we forgive those who trespass against us," also becomes our promise to be givers of charity. During the Reformation times, the Reformers argued, among other things, that the practice of charity should be based not upon the desirability of its object, but upon the transformation of its subject. Thus, our personal feeling as to whether a needy individual or a needy community deserves our charity or otherwise should always be superseded by the commandment and the will of God. Potential givers of charity should therefore respond to persons or communities in need with the faith that their charity is not a zero-sum game, but a deed that God acknowledges and blesses. Again, the New Testament describes charity as a sacrament. For the early Christians, the parable of the sheep and goats, as recorded in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, was not just an eschatological picture of the last judgment where God shall separate the righteous from the unrighteous. For the early Christians, that pericope meant two main things. Number one, it meant that charity to the poor has the power to deliver a person from eternal damnation. And second, charity acquires such power because one meets Christ through this concrete action of showing mercy. And so that takes me to my second main point in this presentation. And now I want to shift from talking about the nature and role of charity to talk about the morality of charitable deeds. The New Testament scriptures cautions that charity should not be motivated by self-interest. So the question all of us, including myself, everybody must ask, if you are a believer, is what inspires us to carry out charitable deeds? Just what inspires us? Does our motivating stem from purely altruistic reasons. I mean, the desire to show compassion for the well-being of the recipients, regardless of what must have caused their need, or whether they deserve our help or they don't deserve our help. What is our main motivation for doing charity? If we perform charity to people because they share our belief system, if we perform charity to people because they are from our families and we are the same blood and they are from our tribes or same race, if our desire to do charity, is inspired by our aim of converting the recipients into our religious group, then we have a problem. If our goal is to win social status so that we will make name in the news, by the media, whatever it is that motivates us, if our motivation is by self-interest, then our charity is not noble, it is even ungodly. Because that is what non-believers do. The politicians who do that. They will give you all the promises, and then they do so because of what they believe they will get in return. If we perform charitable deeds to people, then our charity is going to result in impure, egoistic tendencies. If our charity is motivated by self-interest, then the relationship between the charitable giver and the recipient of that charity is sure going to be characterized by paternalistic tendencies, by dependency mentality, by discrimination, by marginalization, and so on and so forth. So I ask the question again, how best can we address the concomitants of charity? It is a fact that all of us will agree, and I don't think any of us, well, I don't know, but I doubt whether any of us can boldly deny the fact that charity fosters racism and perpetuates paternalism. When charity is done primarily to serve the self-interests of the benefactor, for example, when we do charity purposely to convert the recipients to our own religious groups, or when we give charity to make name and become famous, then that kind of charity engender paternalism, because we are going to favor some of the needy people and sideline others. A moment ago, Dr. Raj said it a moment ago. Then we have an agenda, and that makes the whole thing ungodly. When charity is done with the attitude of superiority, simply because the benefactor has some economic advantage or educational advantage or technological advantage, therefore he or she assumes that they have the moral authority and power to decide who deserves the charity and what form the charity should take, without due consultation with the recipient. Then that attitude at once breeds a relationship of paternalism and discrimination and suspicion, even resistance and disappointment. Furthermore, philanthropy or charity potentially encourages dependency. And this occurs when there is an interminable reliance on the benefactor for funds, for ideas, for personnel. And those of us who have experienced colonialism can attest to this. Dependency occurs when the benefactor consciously or unconsciously maintains a patron-client relationship with the beneficiary. Dependency occurs when the benefactor uses his advantage, be it financial or ideological or technological, to impose ideas and strategies on the recipient simply because he is the one who is providing the resources. Then dependency is sure to occur. Again, dependency occurs where there is no mutual respect for human dignity and equality of the personhood of the recipients. Dependency occurs where there is no stewardship or accountability system in place. Charitable or philanthropic deeds have the potential to stifle initiative on the part of the beneficiary. It has the potential to become a curse and not a blessing. And the thing that can possibly remedy the problems associated with charity or philanthropy, in my humble view, is partnership, mutual partnership, where we partner with the recipients themselves. By partnership, I am referring to an arrangement where the benefactor intentionally forms a trusting relationship with the recipients with the aim of mutually fulfilling an agreed upon expectation by sharing their complementary strengths and resources so as to reach their mutual goal. And a partnership of this nature would surely have a moratorium that will involve a clearly defined set of ground rules, including a plan for transitioning from dependency to self-reliance. So, is charity a blessing that helps or a curse that hurts? Charity becomes a curse when the giver regards themselves as more powerful and view the recipients as powerless and weak. Charity becomes a curse when the givers assume that they are superior and treat the recipients as inferior. Charity becomes a curse when the givers think they know better and are wiser, and therefore they ignore the views of the recipients or disparage the concerns of the recipients, the needy. I know my time is up, so I need to wrap up. It is encouraging to note that in the various strands of the Abrahamic faiths, whether you are talking about those in the area of Judaism or in the Western Christianity, Eastern Christianity, Islam, it is encouraging to know that there seems to be a common understanding that charity is a virtue commanded by God. And in this very brief presentation, I have attempted to characterize the notion of charity from the perspective of the New Testament scriptures, and also highlighted some 4 or 5 points. Number one, that charity is the character of God and a commandment from him. That charity is a service to God and a duty believers must perform. That charity is a sacrament. That charity ought not to be motivated by self-interest, otherwise it becomes a curse rather than a blessing from God. That the problems associated with charity can be tackled by intentionally adopting an attitude of mutual respect, a sense of human dignity and equality, and mutual partnership with the needy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sam. Can you just unshare your screen?
All right.
Thank you. I think you've given us a very lucid dissection of what charity can be and what it isn't. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of points for discussion. I can see on people's faces, they're just biting, edging, we're wishing to get in. So hold your horses if you can. Let's hear our final speaker for tonight, because sadly, Dr. Zuru from the Eastern Orthodox Christian congregation is in hospital with his son and can't join us tonight. So our final speaker is for tonight, before we open for discussion, is Sheikh Salim Arif. He's a prominent Johannesburg-based Islamic scholar and a leading proponent of Quranic Islam in South Africa. Aside from his primary and secondary education in an apartheid-era system, Sheikh Salim has spent half his life in Egypt and Lebanon as a language instructor and religious teacher. And since his return to South Africa, he has specialized in scriptural history, attracting many independent-minded Muslims who flock to his exclusively Quran-centric Islam. I hope he will also explain to people who are not aware what is Quran-centric Islam. Sheikh Salim is committed to the timeless universalism of Islam within and beyond the 21st century, and he's currently researching a major book on the message of the divine in the Quran, the message of the divine in the Quran. So, welcome, Sheikh Salim. The floor is yours.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah,
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Before I start, Prof, I think I've got another surprise for you. I don't think I'll do the talk because Rabbi Mariam has covered all the stuff I want to say, and I think that I'm Jewish.
Well, you have a better accent, so we'd like to hear from you anyway. So.
You know, you've said all the things that I was going to say. Now, sadaqah, we have sadaqah. You have good things happen to those who are generous. I have that in the Quran. You have nothing is really yours, it belongs to God. I have that in my speech prepared. You have helped people to become self-sufficient. That is there. It is a positive commandment to give sadaqah. I have the same thing in the Quran. When you do, you shouldn't embarrass or hurt people. I have the same commandment in the Quran. And the one where you said give to the relatives, I have that in the Quran. So really, I think that we should all just have a lovely time. I'm going to make a nice cappuccino because you've done my speech for me. But in respect and to respect of my teacher, Dr. Taj Hagi, I shall attempt to repeat all the stuff that you have said. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Almighty God, the mercy to all and everything created, and the compassionate to each one of us individually. This mercy extends to everything on creation. There is no preconceived sin, and God's compassion extends to us individually. This is very important because the Bismillah begins every surah in the Quran except Surah 9. And God seems to be continuously reminding us that his love for us is greater than the sum total of everything that we think we can do that is wrong. So he's the merciful to all and is the compassionate to each individually. And there are only three ways that you can do this. And those are the three things that I will address. So in the Quran, this concept of Rahmah and Rahim, mercy and compassion, is mentioned repeatedly as an injunction and a decree to guide humanity towards the ideal of harmony and justice in our lives. There seems to be a disconnect in Islam today between what happened in the 7th century and what continues to happen in the 21st and the 31st and the 41st. And it is there that my focus lies, because the message that in every talk that I ever give, is to talk to the audience that is right now. The immediate audience to this message is God's mercy, and God's compassion is always there for us. So Rahman and Rahim is repeated in the Quran to guide humanity then to harmony and justice. Mercy, Rahmah, is emphasized no less than 114 times. And there are 114 chapters in the Quran. But of course, it's emphasized in a context of the benevolence of God to the ingratitude of humanity. Compassion and kindness is repeated 87 times in the context, again, of gratitude to God and social justice to our fellow beings. The Islam of the Quran, thus, brings each of us closer to understanding what is required of us individually and collectively, so that we may live a happy, harmonious, and meaningful life. What is it that's required? Excuse me. My topic tonight will try to cover these, and I have selected 3 points. Charity as a power, an aid to good, or an injury to humanity. Historical charity as a concept, charity from the Quran, social justice as charity used or abuse. Now, in an unequal world, such as the world we have created, hunger, poverty, homelessness, depravity, human suffering, these are all pervasive. And this indignity affects different people differently. One, it's either a clear demonstration of our innate humanity, and to that extent we reach out, as Mr. Warren Buffett has done and donated 71% of his enormous wealth, which amounts to 46 billion, and he still gets more. What a wonderful man. I salute his humanity. And so too Bill Gates. But whilst this clear demonstration of our innate humility does that and drives us to do such things, there's the other, which is and creates a distance moved away from that ideal. Now, Western industrialized nations fare much better than countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America. Islam, and by Islam, I'm going to talk about Quranic Islam. Quranic Islam declares such inhumanity to man a moral sin against God, like the precious gift of life. When I say Islam, Quranic Islam, I think I need to explain a little. So there is the eternal message of the Quran. And this message has two audiences. The initial intended audience, the initial audience that were present there, and the intended audience that will arise as the years unfurl in the ensuing centuries. And this is where we find ourselves. The beauty, when you look for this, is that the Quran speaks in the ever-present tense. And the ever-present tense is ever present to any and all audience from the 7th to the 21st century. Quranic Islam is clear about that. The other Islam, that's the created version, the version that the people who have given themselves the name ulama, learned people. They have a version that is very different to the Quranic Islam. The Quran is used very, very rarely. Everything that they speak about from the microphones of the billions of mosques is based on stories that they've heard, from stories that they've been told, from stories that other people told them, from stories that those people heard, from other people who died and others who remained to tell them, and it goes back and back and back like musical chairs. But regrettably, this has caused a regression, and it has, the causal and causality of it has resulted in the Quran being sidelined. So when I say Quranic Islam, I mean whatever I say, I can give you the chapter and the verse to reference that what I'm saying is not my fallible opinion. It is, as I understand it, the words of Almighty God. Now, in Quranic Islam, God declares that such inhumanity to other people is a mortal sin against God and the precious gift of life. We have to first and foremost understand and accept that life is a very precious gift. And once we understand that that gift is given only once through the mercy of God, we understand that every single thing attached to life, it follows, has to be part and parcel and pay homage to the gift. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن التقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين. صدق الله العظيم. The Quran says, and that's the Arabic, in chapter 95, it says, indeed, we have created humankind in the finest mold, in the finest state and design, absolutely the best of all creation. Wow. But sadly, this human being had us to reduce him to the lowest of the low. Now look at us. We are champions, aren't we? I think we are. We are the greatest in everything, every conceivable thing. We've conquered the oceans, we've conquered the skies, we've conquered the land. We are true masters. We are genius. But our inhumanity to our fellow human beings is unlike anything in any part of creation. Only we kill our own. Only we are greedy. Only we murder to enrich. Only we plan by design to capture, to torture, to enslave. Only we do this. Such greatness, such magnificence, reduced to the lowest of the low. Surah 95. So this greatest in everything, but our inhumanity to our fellow human beings shows that we have lost that special something. And that special something the Quran describes in Arabic is the ahsan al-taqweem. That most beautiful of potential. That purity and capacity to do the right thing for the right reason. Instead of we, collective we are obsessed with I and my. Now God continues in the same Surah 95. Illa, except alladhina amanu wa amilu salihah. So I'll repeat it so it hangs together. خلق الإنسان في أحسن التقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات. We've created this most fantastic thing in the finest form, and through his action we had to reduce him to the lowest form, illa, except those who do the amalus salihah. Now you would be surprised to learn that the amalus salihah means those that do the correct, righteous thing. And this Almighty God repeats for us 82 times throughout the verses of the Quran. Except those who believe and do the righteous deeds, they are the redeemed and have happiness unending. And you'll see people in this world that are truly happy, that have found love, that have found compassion, that have found joy, that have a bond with their children. They have the best things in life, because the best things in life are not really things at all. Now, charity in the Quran comes close to the concept of charity in Judaism, as I've listened to Rabbi Maria and Dr. Sam. But it is called by a different name. We have a 3 category of it. The first is zakah. Zakat comes from the Arabic root and the Hebrew root of zakah, which means to cleanse, to purify. And then we have sadaqah, which Rabbi, you have clarified. And then we have amalu salihah, doing the right thing for the right reason, doing good things. And they're not mentioned once, as I said, the one is mentioned 144 times, amalu salihah 82 times. Some scholars disagree that zakah is charity because zakah is not just a voluntary fistful of dollars given in pity to the poor, however noble that may still be. I'm sure the poor still need the fistful of dollars. So if you have it, please give it. But zakah is clearly not that. Zakah is the obligatory sharing of one's wealth and favored good fortune with all less fortunate members of society. So zakah is the obligatory sharing of your good fortune with those who have not got or received that gift effectively. Zakah is aimed at equality and social justice. That is its principal requirement. Giving freedom from oppression and the bondage of debt. Because these, apart from more poverty, this bondage of oppression removes every semblance of dignity from the human soul. I grew up partly in a country that didn't recognize me as an equal human being. And to this day, in our vernacular, we say sawubona in the Zulu. Sawubona means I see you, I acknowledge you. And that is really all that Black people wanted, was to be seen, to be acknowledged. So when we grew up, life had a 3-foot ceiling, and I was born 5'4". So I always had to bow and to bend. And it is that that shaped me, and that made me realize that the greatest indignity one can give to another is not to recognize them as a fellow human being. Obviously, the opposite of that is zakah, where you recognize someone and you give to that person the due recognition that you are equal and you are like unto me. Zakah then is best explained, beautifully explained, as an act of gratitude to God in worship. An act of gratitude to God in worship. Zakah is premised on the unequivocal fact, Islamic fact, that all wealth, all good fortune, like oil pouring out of the grounds, for example, or genius, Einstein, or ability, or talent, my favorite singer, Andrea Bocelli, beautiful talent. All of this is a gift from God. Some people have the gift of money. Some people have the gift of knowledge. Some people have the gift of poetry. So we all have such wonderful gifts. But zakah is premised on the unequivocal fact that all these gifts are from God to us. And as such, we are mere temporary custodians of it. We don't own them, and we cannot therefore abuse them as if we were the owners of such. How? How we choose to use our gifts, our talents, our resources to wealth, defines our morality and is an expression of our submission to the one God. If we truly say that we submit to the one God, then that submission has to be reflected in our actions and in our recognition of our fellow human beings in accordance with zakah. Our gratitude can serve God to illuminate our societies, or our greed can withhold the light of mercy and compassion to them. So great is our power. God gives this to us freely, with every life, a gift. We decide when, why, how, what for, and we withhold sharing that beauty with another. Why we do this is a topic for another discussion. That is our choice to make. We can share the light, we can share the music, or we can keep it for ourselves. Islam, though, is premised on our own free choice, and God does not interfere. It's our choice. God does not change his ways. God sets the universe the way God has set the universe. The earth will be exactly tilted at 26.3 degrees. It won't change. H2O will be water. It won't become H3O. That will all stay the same. The only thing that is free is our choice. How we use that choice, how we assemble that choice, what informs that choice. That is ours to make. God won't make it for us. So when you ask the question, why are there's so many good people, why do bad things happen to good people? It's because somewhere we are making the wrong choices all the time.
Salim, you got 3
Our
minutes
free
left.
choice
Salim, 3 minutes.
and the Quran is the eternal, unchanged guidance that will lead us to the righteous choices along our path. In Islam, one freely submits to the one and only God and of creation. We establish prayer to communicate to God, and we worship God. So we say this in the following words. It says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. You submit to God, and then you pray. أَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ, you perform the prayer. وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, and then you give your worship to mankind. So I pray to God, and I give to God my prayer, but I give to the humanity the good deeds that I have to.
Salim, you got 3
Because
minutes.
I'm almost out of time, I went a little bit slow because I thought you were wanting to make up, but let me rush now. So the role of charity in contemporary society then, excuse me, if this pestilence of COVID has taught us anything at all, it is that life is temporal. See, we are not islands. We are the ocean. We are all connected. And nobody is born full of greed and selfishness. We learn these inhuman traits from the evil that surrounds us. Islamic countries, so-called Muslim world, sadly, these rank among the worst human rights offenders in the world. Oil wealth. Despite obscene opulence from oil wealth, these tyrannical despots who call themselves kings and sultans, contrary to the Quran. One example, I will choose just one example due to time constraints. Saudi Arabia, birthplace of Islamic monotheism and social democracy as evidenced by the Constitution of Medina and the Prophet of Islam. This has become the world's most tyrannical, ungodly, uncharitable country, despite its enormous revenues from oil. In good conscience and Quranic guidance, it could eradicate poverty in the name of Islam. Instead, it uses its huge zakah fund to export the ugly face of Wahhabism to the world. It funds the building of mosques in every country. It buys the favor of the self-elected clergy who are so empowered by this funding that they go on to erect mosques in the poorest of the poor places in South Africa, where hungry children play in the mosque courtyards and they have no food. This is an abuse of charity. This is an abuse of what God Almighty had intended. So I end my talk because my time is up. And these mosques spew Wahhabist doctrine of hate and divisiveness among societies. In South Africa, there are grand mosques built in the poorest black townships. These serve no ostensible purpose to do nothing for the poor. Instead of schools, businesses, bursaries, educational grants, none of them. They spend US dollars 200 billion. I have the source for all of what I'm saying. Financial analysts have calculated that the annual zakah spend is 200 billion to exceeds this amount. Yet there is shamefully no change in the bondage of poverty, development. Development aid workers state that much of zakah practice is mismanaged, wasted, and totally ineffective to alleviate poverty and support. The book Nassim Shirazi is a source. So zakah collection in most countries, and I'm finishing now, zakah collection in most countries is given to the resident clergy, who it empowers them, and in their infinite, ridiculous wisdom, they decide to who they give this to, and it is usually matched with a great amount of injury by reducing the one who asks to a beggar. He should not be asking for this, because when you ask for zakah, it is anti-God. Lastly, we do have in South Africa some good things. We have Doctors Without Borders. There's Warren Buffett, 46 billion. And we also have a man, a wonderful young doctor, who a few years ago started a wonderful thing called the Gift of the Givers. I don't know if he's not black enough or whatever, but he hasn't achieved any award from South Africa as yet. One day the government will, when they're done with corruption. But for now, within 3 hours, this single man with his army of volunteers can put up 3 full plane loads full of medicine and food and take it to any country on the planet where it is needed. He's done so in Tahiti, he's done so in Africa, he's done so in Asia. And this is called the Gift of the Givers. So ladies and gentlemen, as I end, I wish to say to you that all is not lost. We are better than what the clergy have made us in Islam. Quranic Islam is the only guidance that will assist us and help us eradicate the scourge of poverty and inhumanity to other people. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Sheikh Salim, for a fascinating presentation. So we've heard tonight 3 different but interlinking perspectives from Jerusalem, from Rabbi Miriam, from Accra, from Dr. Sam, and from Johannesburg, from Sheikh Salim. The floor will be open now for questions, but I'm going to kickstart our discussion. And mine is very simple, and I think you may have answered it all, but I want to hear again briefly your point of view. And my question is this: can charity be a vice then, as well as a virtue? Is charity just something positive, or is there also something negative about it? Is it a vice, or is it a virtue as well? So let's start with Rabbi Miriam, then Dr. Sam and Sheikh Salim. When they've given the answers, then we'll open up the floor for general discussion.
Well, I think what we mentioned before that I guess that your motivation is very important, and then the actual thing. Like, I realized I shouldn't have said anything about other religions. I should have just said about Jewish and not criticized anybody else. But I mean, I do think of the churches that's the missionaries that started hospitals and schools, and like they did so much good all over the world, but there was an agenda. So I'm not sure. I don't think I should be the one to judge, but I think we all agree that it should be done for the sake of helping and not for the sake of manipulating anybody. But I don't have any, more specific.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Miriam. I'm sure other people will be picking your brain shortly. Let's turn to Dr. Sam. Vice or virtue, charity? I can't hear you, Dr. Sam.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Charity becomes a vice when it is self-serving, because then we have our agenda. Then it is no longer us obeying, recognizing that God has blessed us to become a source of blessing, but we have an agenda that we want to use our charity as power to accomplish. But it becomes virtue when it is done in selfless obedience to the commandment of God. And it is also done with mutual respect and a sense of human dignity. So yes, it's a vice if it is self-serving, and it is virtue if it is done in selfless obedience to God and with sacrificial love for my fellow human being.
Thank you for your succinct response. And the same question to you, Sheikh Salim. Charity, vice or virtue?
The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Charity is abused right now, and it certainly does not meet the required standard. In my country, South Africa, and I can only speak for South Africa, I'm very proud to say that we are I'm very proud to say that in the most unequal country on earth, the church groups, all three of the monotheistic faiths, during the COVID crisis have shown the love of humanity for humanity trumps anything else. That's from the Jewish synagogues have fed people, the Muslim community came out in millions to feed people. And I think that if that goodness is redirected and not given to the clergy, but redirected through another source, then I think that the charity that the Muslims of South Africa, who are fantastically kind people, I think that that charity will reach people who really need it. But until that happens, it is purely a Wahhabist ploy in the main. And for that, it fails the initial reason for it.
Okay, thank you. Now we open up the floor. Anyone can come in, so just raise your hands and I can see you, and then I'll ask you to come in. So anyone raising a hand out there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, go for it, Nawaz.
Yeah. Question and comments for Rabbi Miriam. Brilliant, brilliant what you told us. Lots of things I didn't know. I wish I could take you to Sri Lanka and put you in front of our ulamas and you give them a talk.
Thank you.
Because in the country I come from, if you start talking about anything negative, immediately, it's almost automatic. It's the Jews.
Wow.
Yeah, it's true. But what, listening to you, listening to Dr. Sam, listening to Sheikh Salim, we are all people of the book. And you can see the thread going through the book. from the Suhuf down to the Quran. And that has reinforced my thoughts. Dr. Taj was the one who reintroduced me to studying my religion, because he used to have Tuesday seminars, Taj.
We now have it online. You can join every Tuesday with Zoom.
Okay, can you send me the link, please?
Yeah, and it's open to Muslims and non-Muslims. So
Yeah.
we do the dissection and the debate and discuss the Quran.
Yeah. Question. Anyway, thank you, Rabbi Miriam.
Pleasure.
I learned a lot today. Thanks.
So you don't have a
Quick-
question for them?
Quick question for Sheikh Salim. Sadaqah and I've got it down here somewhere. What's the other one? Sadaqah and
Zakah.
Zakat.
one.
Zakat.
Zakat, yeah, sorry. Old age. Zakat. Now, which can we give non-Muslims? Now, I've been told I can't give one of those to non-Muslims.
Glad you asked that question. The book of God, the Quran, says there's no Muslims mentioned in the Quran. It's not for Muslims, it's for humanity. You can give everything that you want to any other human being in need, and that person does not have to be a Muslim, because God is God to all creation.
Why the two?
Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim.
Why the two?
I beg
The two Sadaqah and Zakat. Why two?
Why two? Sadaqah is what you have, what you do out of the goodness of your heart. What you have, you can give to anybody you like to. But zakah is a compulsory, an obligation of your gift, of your wealth. You see, your wealth that you have, understand it as a gift from God. So you're a custodian of it. You may think you own it, but it doesn't.
So this is the tax we
you
have to pay
hold
God.
on to it,
Yeah.
if you hold on to it too tightly, you will become greedy, and from greed, you'll become dhulm, you'll become tyrannical. So to cleanse yourself, to become greater than that which you love, you give it away. God has made it mandatory, obligatory on you to share part of that wealth for a good cause with those people who don't have. Sadaqah, even after you've given zakah and you still feel that, man, I'm going to help this person here or buy that baby. You see a lady in a supermarket and she's looking at this pram and she's really measuring up which one can she take, and she takes the cheaper pram because she can't, and you go and you say, no, for the little one, yeah, let me buy the pram. That's sadaqah. But it really amounts to the same thing in the end. There's no major difference.
Thank you,
The
Sheikh
one
Salim.
thing I'd
Nobody's
like to
explained
leave,
that.
last thing I'd like to leave with you though, is please, the clergy have come up with these divisions. God is God to all humanity, and your zakah and sadaqah and amalu salihah are all for humanity.
Thank you, Sheikh Salim. Okay, let's open up and widen this thing. We just don't want this thing to be a Muslim-only thing. So please, we want our Jewish friends and colleagues to ask questions, as well as our Christian brothers and sisters. So please raise your hands and go for it, please. Gwen, out in Cape Town, I'm going to call on you. Do you have something to add, something to disagree with?
I would just like to say that I would be very happy to make Sheikh Salim my rabbi. I really enjoyed what he said. I could have sat and listened to him for another hour. I was very impressed with with Rabbi Miriam's ideas. And in terms of Dr. Sam, there is a difference in Judaism between charity and tzedakah. Charity comes from the Latin word caritas, meaning heart. You're giving from your heart because you're feeling sorry for people. But being sorry for people comes from condescension. And tzedakah means justice. You're giving because if God wanted to make this the best world he can, it's not just that some people should have and other people shouldn't have. So you're not giving out of charity, out of mercy, out of duty. You're giving because you want to try and right the world, because you've got to something today. Tomorrow you mightn't have anything. It's not just that they should be rich and poor.
Thank you, Gwen. Let me turn to, since people are a bit reticent, I think I'm just going to embarrass them to ask questions and comments. Let me turn to Professor Dan McVeigh in Texas. Your thoughts and comments about our three speakers?
Oh, excellent presentations. Thank you, each and every one. Rabbi Miriam, Sheikh Salim, and Dr. Sam. I have questions for each of the speakers.
Go ahead.
So let me begin with Rabbi Miriam. Thank you for your excellent presentation. I'm reminded of readings from the book of Deuteronomy. In Hebrew, was it Devarim? Or yeah, the fifth book of the Torah. Chapter 15. Where a very interesting text where God said, there shall be no poor among you. And then a few verses later, he says, if there is a poor man among you, treat him fairly, etc., etc. And then toward the end of the chapter, it says, you shall always have the poor with you. So I'm interested in your view on that text and how it might apply to this topic today.
Yeah, that I wanted to bring that as my closing words, that when verse 11 says that there will never cease to be needy ones in your land, which is why I command you to open your heart. And I really enjoyed hearing the Arabic, so here's a little Hebrew treat. I think Dr. Sam expressed it, that charity isn't just for the people who receive it, but it's for the people who give, and because it's going to make kinder people to open your heart. So I think there's a value in that. I mean, I think was it Nazim? He sort of mentioned the word taxes. Like maybe you would think that now that there's governments and like, Social Security and all those other stuff, that maybe you don't need to, and it's all just set up, and you just do it automatically. But maybe the human side is still important. I think it's what I said about the Jerusalem, the heavenly Jerusalem, and the real life. Like obviously you aspire to a world that's better and everything's equal, but like probably it's not going to get there, so then you need the backup plan. But thank you for bringing those verses. Yeah.
Thank you. And a question for Dr. Sam?
Yeah, Sam, good to see you. My question for you is in relationship to when we talk about poverty, addressing poverty, the best ways to minimize dependency and paternalism. How do you think, from the Christian perspective, to what extent are Christians admonished and inspired to address systemic transformation rather than always individual transformation? In other words, the old proverb, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him to fish, he can fish for a lifetime or have food for a lifetime. However, what about access to the sea or access to the river to be able to fish? So there are systemic situations. You mentioned colonialism and the complications, and I think we're all aware of some of the inequalities, in the world economic system. So how do you feel Christianity might address the concept of systemic transformation, not simply individual cases of charity?
Dr. Sam, your microphone, your audio.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry
Yeah.
about that. I think the approach should begin from teaching, giving the kind of teaching that will help people to discover themselves, discover the potential that the Creator, that God gave each and every one of them. I think it is Dr. Taj also a moment ago made a point. Every one of us, every human being, no matter who you are, whether you are white, black, yellow, brown, whatever, every human being is created by God with gifts. Our gifts may vary. And so the fact that I am poor in terms of money does not mean that I'm poor completely or in all respects. So I think that to address systemic poverty, from the Christian perspective, teachers of the Bible should use or draw principles from both the Old Testament and the New Testament that will help every human being to discover their God-given talent. And so Christians should teach people to discover their God-given gifts. And then they should as well teach people to develop their God-given gifts. So the question of ministering to people who are in need, who are in poverty, can probably be approached from two angles. One is when you meet somebody who is famishing, who is at the point of dying because of hunger, well, he may not have the strength for you even to teach him how to fish. What he needs from you is to, for food. What he needs from you immediately is you give him food to eat. And then, but that is not all. You will give him food to eat, and after 2-3 hours, he'll be hungry again. But which is why you should teach him to discover his God-given potentials, so that once he's able to discover and develop and deploy his God-given potentials, then he will be in a position to address whatever systemic challenges he has in his own life or in his own society.
Okay, thank you. And then Professor Dan, question for Sheikh Salim.
Yes, thank you. Sheikh Salim, greetings from Texas in the USA. It's good to see you again. My question for you is, sometimes on this topic of charity and tzedakah and those concepts, some people say in some of the Abrahamic faith traditions, well, if someone is poor, is that not their destiny? Is that not the will of God for their lives? And thus, I'll make a token donation or just give something, but to really seek to seriously, if I might say, assist people and help them transform and change their lives, that's God's work, not mine. I've heard this a few times, down through the years. I'm wondering about your perspective on that from the Quran. Volume.
Sheikh Salim.
Sorry.
Volume first.
Thank you for clarifying the last word from the Quran. Otherwise, I would have made a total fool of myself in my response. It's easy from the Quran. Nobody, no human being deserves to be destitute, to be in need, to be oppressed, because that is not living life freely. Life is a supreme gift, and whoever challenges life or compromises it is a penny candy in the confectionery of power. So, the Quranic view is that, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. وما تنفقوا من شيء فإن الله به عليم. Translated. You can never have extended happiness of virtue and righteousness in your life and goodness unless you spend part of what you dearly love for the cause of God and humanity. And God knows very well whatever you spend for his cause. So if a society, and we have a testimony here in the year 632, when we had the Charter of Medina, Muslim, Jew, Christian lived together in the then Yathrib. And the Charter of Medina did not demand zakah from non-Muslims. They paid the jiz'ah, the tax. But there was not a single household that was impoverished or that needed and was not assisted, because the system created of social justice in Islam, there's still many things in the Arabic language that helps us. The word tabassum. If you ever have the chance to read a book, The Road to Mecca by Muhammad Asad, who was an Austrian Jew. He was in this train, the old Jordan train, and in the cabin was a Frenchman with a little kufiyachi on, and Arab, French speaking, and a Bedouin Arab, and of course this journalist, young before he became Muslim. And when the train stopped in Palestine, the guys out on the platform were selling these cakes. And this Arab guy then pulls up his galabaya and he takes out his little handkerchief and he unties the knot and he takes out the money and he pays it to this man. And this man gives him the big cake and he takes it again and he sits down and he looks at this cake and he's clearly hungry now. And he's about to take a bite and he looks up and he sees this white Austrian person looking at him. And he stops and he says, "Itfaddal." And this guy says, no, thank you. He says, "Itfaddal." He said, no, "Itfaddal. Itfaddal." No. So the Frenchman says to him, "Monsieur, this man will not eat this food unless you take a part of it. So I suggest, please, you take a little bit so we can carry on." Huh? So he then broke a piece off and he ate it. This worried him so much, it impressed him so much, that the culture was, when you eat, I get full. So I hope that in a poetical way addresses your question that no, it is not true that when someone is poor or destitute or in trouble or in oppressive debt, that we should leave him there because God had so ordained it. God had not so ordained it. Many a flower is born to blush unseen, sir, but some waste their sweetness on the desert air.
Thank
Like
you.
apartheid.
Thank you. Any further? I've got people in mind, but anyone else wants to jump in at this moment? If not, I'm going to ask Jabin in Johannesburg to give us her comments or questions to any of the three speakers.
I really enjoyed all three presentations. I think Rabbi Mariam's was really quite enlightening for me. I hadn't known about, I think especially the last slide, the levels, the 8 levels. That was a very interesting slide for me. And it clarified exactly, what true charity means for me. Dr. Sam, I really enjoyed your talk as well. I think I found a lot of commonality between the three. as someone has mentioned, because we all come from the same root, I think the three Abrahamic monotheistic religions. So Sheikh Salim's as well, you know, there were commonalities in all three, but really interesting from all the presentations. I don't really have any questions in particular. But
Okay.
just,
Thank you for your comments. Thank you, Jabin. Let's turn to Tanya out in Maryland. Tanya Bryce. Tanya. Tanya Bryce. Okay. What
Make
about
cappuccino for Sheikh Salim.
okay. All right. All right. Let me go to someone else then. What about Marcia Raymond? Anything you would like to add or comment on, Marcia?
Obviously, the similarity and the basic thoughts between all three are always interesting to hear and how they're doing it. But I just picked up something very little, just a nice way of expressing what tzedakah or charity can be. And it's important that it's not only the idea of the recipient, but the giver, as long as they're not doing it for wrong reasons, also benefits from being a person who gives charity. And I just picked up something very nice, something that I read in preparing for this. It says that and this was from a Jewish perspective talking about tzedakah, as is the case with justice, this critical social responsibility, and that is what it is, cannot be done to someone, rather it should be done with someone. And in Hebrew, the word meaning to give, which is natan, and it's a 5-letter word, whether you spell it in English or in Hebrew, mean you can read it backwards as well as forwards. It's N-A-T-A-N, so whichever way you read it. So the thought from this was that the word can be read forward and backwards. So when we think about philanthropy and the idea of giving, it also tells us that it's about receiving. And I thought that was a very relevant and important aspect, as well as the fact that we've got to emphasize that caritas, which Gwen brought up as being the basis for charity, is not only about giving of anything other than care and kindness. It doesn't have to be anything that is passed between the two people.
Thank you.
My only thoughts.
Who's this? Okay. Can I call on David Whitelaw? Anything you want to add or ask any of our speakers, David? David? All right. Let's go to the next person. Martin, you're a young man out in Johannesburg. What would you like to say to the three speakers?
Yeah, so first off, I really enjoyed all of the talks, and I appreciate all of you guys for preparing for them, and thank you. So yes, I found great solitude in that there is a thread between the three religions, and that is that not only is it prescribed, it is also seems to be compulsory in all of the religions, which I found quite nice. And then also about I like the point of acknowledging and respecting those who we give charity to, as opposed to looking down upon them and looking at them as unequal to us. Because we're giving to them, we feel superior, and I feel like that tends to become the rhetoric that happens a lot with, especially in South Africa. It seems, I don't know, I can't speak for all of South Africa, but I'm saying, like, I see it commonplace where it's like you know, because I'm giving you something, I expect you to appreciate it, or like, I mean, people should appreciate things, but in the sense that you should be praised for it. I like what Miriam talked about with regards to anonymity is on a higher plane, when it's anonymity of the receiver and the giver. I feel like that's the best possible method of charity. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Let's get back to Tanya, if she's around. Tanya Bryce, you want to add something or any questions you have for our 3 distinguished speakers? Tanya? No, don't know. What about Virginia? Virginia?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I really appreciated the presenter's remarks, and it strikes me how much in common we have among the Abrahamic religions, that God asks us to be generous, to have mercy, justice. That has struck me in each of these Open Mosque presentations that I've been a part of. It seems that hospitality plays into the giving and receiving of assistance and charity. And I appreciated one of the participants' remarks about how it's a blessing for the giver to give as well as to the recipient. And I would say that it's a hospitable action for someone to receive just as much as it is for someone to give. And I really appreciated Reverend Sam's remarks about finding the partnership in charity, because I do agree that when you push off assistance when it's unwanted, I'm learning that that's not so good. But to seek that partnership and that commonality of giving and receiving. So I really appreciated this presentation, and I thank you for being invited to participate in this way. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope to see you in future monthly seminars as well. Let me turn to Shireen Hatami out in Worthing, south of England.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Taj.
Salam to you, Shireen.
Well, to me, it's absolutely amazing. Rabbi Miriam, I personally have never ever listened or heard a rabbi speak, and the very fact that it's a lady, power to us, Dr. Sam and Brother Salim. So mine is just one straightforward, simple question, and that is it a moral duty for all countries to give sanctuary to asylum seekers? Is that a charitable act for countries as a whole?
Good question. Is much in the news today, all over the Mediterranean. So any of the 3, let's go first to Dr. Sam. Is giving asylum and refuge to people seeking a better life for political or economic reasons, is that an act of charity for a country?
My answer is yes. As long as the person you are assisting is not running away from some type of crime, but it needs your help for economic reasons, for those kind of reasons. Yes, I think it is our duty to give.
Okay.
I mean, yes, sorry. So that is my simple answer.
Do you want to add something else, or can I go to the next person?
Go to the next person.
Okay. Sheikh Salim, is it moral incumbent on the country? The question is not individuals, but the country to give refuge to asylum seekers and economic migrants and so forth?
No. No, not at all.
Not at all. Okay, so you've got the opposite opinion to Dr. Sam. Can you elaborate, please?
Well, if a country that accepts people, accepts them because they have been devastated due to some act of God or war or whatever, and they really, really, like when Idi Amin threw out the Indian people from Uganda, then of course some of the countries took them. Canada recently displayed great Christian fortitude by taking in the people from the war of Syria. But all good things come at a price. And as I said earlier, the way to hell is paved with good intentions. We now find that in South Africa, people have taken our passports. They buy our passports. They corrupt people. They come from the East. And then they take these passports and go to the European countries. And as such, South African passports now can no longer have access to European countries. We need to get these long visas. It's not only South Africa in particular, it's every country has its responsibility first and foremost to its own citizenry. And unless the country is very wealthy and the country needs this people, then it's fine. But just to go boatloads of people because your country, your government is messed up and continues to mess up like mine does, 500 billion tomorrow is too little, and 700 billion the next day. We steal, we rampage, we loot, and then the citizenry of that country then decides to go and live elsewhere. I mean, you just have to look at Britain. Look at Britain. It's been taken over. I think that there should be a certain degree of or criteria, certainly, and if the criteria fulfills the humanitarian condition, then yes. But willy-nilly, because I don't like my government, I think that as a South African who fought for my freedom, where we died, many of our people died, many of our priests died, many of our dear friends died. We were thrown from buildings, and we died for the fight of the freedom of our country. We stood up. Today, you look at a country like Zimbabwe. There's no apartheid there. Who are they fighting? Why don't they stand up and take this horrible government out and replace it? Like we did. We had to fight, physically fight, a foreign white supremacist government. And we did that. We didn't all run to Canada or to the UK. Yeah, some of us did, but most of us bore the brunt of it. So for me, that's a personal one. I think if there's a war in your country, if there's a tsunami that hit your country, yes. But apart from that, I think people should correct the conditions that surround them first before they go to other countries.
Okay, I think your view is going to have some opposition, Sheikh Salim, and that's welcome. We welcome that. But before we open it up to everyone, let's hear first from Rabbi Miriam, and then we talk about Sheikh Salim's idea that refugees or economic migrants should only be permitted for genuine reasons or acts of God, civil war, and so forth, but not just for coming to with a pastures are greener. So,
can I put a penny in here, please, Raj?
Well, hang on. Can you
Yes.
wait for your penny? I want to get to Rabbi Miriam, and then you can have your penny. Okay, Rabbi Miriam.
Well, I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I appreciate Sheikh Salim saying what he really thinks and not just trying to be politically correct.
Yes.
I also agree that the first strategy should be to fix the problem in the home country, because, you know, people give up a lot when they leave their land and their culture. So obviously making their place safe and prosperous should be the first plan. Is it a commandment? Like what I've been reading about is the commandment to love the stranger, and because we were strangers in the land of Egypt. So I think that whether it's a specific category or just a gut feeling, there is certainly the gut feeling of, when there was nowhere for the Jews to go, and we should, from the Holocaust, that we should let people in, and in Israel for sure, and anywhere. But I agree that there is a cost, and what can I say? Like, I think Israel did a kind of bad job with the refugees from Sudan because they like let them in, but then didn't provide proper like work options or health insurance, and it's kind of just like stuck. And then they're like, well, maybe you should try and go somewhere else. But like we got the credit for ticking off the box and saying like, okay, you can come here and like rather not die, but it's not like a kind of permanent a plan for integration. So yeah, I think you have to find the balance. If you have like a country of 9 million people and you have like 50 million refugees, you're going to lose some of the character of your country. And like, but I think I would give a little more weight to the human side than the Sheikh Salim, but also with the practical, a little bit of practical.
Thank you, Rabbi Miriam. Nawaz, your penny?
Yes. And going back historically, what about the first refugees that went because they were persecuted by the Meccans, the Qurayshis? Prophet sent them to, was it Ethiopia, where they were accepted?
So we're talking about political refugees, and that I think most people will agree with. But for example, right now in the Mediterranean, how many of them are fleeing political oppression, and how many of them are economic migrants? Okay.
Well, it's difficult to say.
The latest study says the vast majority are economic migrants. And this is where Rabbi Miriam and Sheikh Salim, I think, hit the nail on the head. Shouldn't it be the priority to fix locally what's happening there in terms of corruption?
I think the Western countries are trying to do that.
No, the people themselves must do it.
Yeah.
You can't allow other people to do it. You know, for example, who goes abroad now? It is the best and the brightest, the sharpest and the fittest. They should be staying at home to fix their own countries. Okay, but anyway, I'm sure there are other views. Let me ask, since we got we've let the genie out of the bottle. Mr. John Cox, do you want to come in here regarding whether accepting of migrants and asylum seekers, is that an act of charity for a country, or do you have a different view about that? Can't hear you. Okay, John Cox. Can we hear you? John Cox? John, we can't hear you. No. Unmute yourself.
I got to leave you, Taj.
Okay, thanks, Nawaz. We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Nawaz. Okay, John, go for it.
Yep. I think it depends on the reasons for migration. If people are fleeing from persecution in their home country, and can be a genuine sense of providing asylum, but for people who are running away from persecution, from fear, from terror. But it's a balancing act.
But the question was, if I may interrupt, the question was, is this an act of charity when we allow migrants and asylum seekers and refugees to come to a country?
Well, it can be.
Okay. All right. Let me go to Tanya there, Tanya Bryce. And we're talking about the migrants and asylum seekers right now. I like your views about that, but then also I called upon you earlier, but there was no response. Any questions and comments to the three speakers?
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a call that I ended up on.
There's no need to apologize.
But as it relates to the question at hand around asylum seekers and if that's an act of charity, it depends on what kind of country you're in. And so if your country says that it's a, for instance, Christian country, and is governed by, Christian values, which is what the United States likes to say. They're Judeo-Christian, but we don't know what we are really right now. That it would require that there is an acceptance of asylum seekers, largely because of the command to accept the stranger. But the thing that we have to recognize when we're having these kinds of discussions is that there's a whole lot of play into who are the folks that are often accepted. So I know in this country, there is a strong anti-Blackness sentiment. And so when we even have set quotas as to who are going to be accepted as asylum seekers or who can come and immigrate to this country, it is very favored towards white immigrants.
And so you think that's not an act of charity then? Have we lost her?
This, and I think is important when we're talking about this. But yes, I do think it's an act of charity for a country to engage in this way, whether or not we agree with the act of engaging in asylum seekers. We have to have rules about that. But I don't know if the conversation came up with regarding can charity promote racism, which is one of the questions.
Right, yeah. In fact, and that's why I want you to come in with that. Can you comment on in relation to that, to the three speakers?
Right, and so I resonate. By the way, the three speakers were amazing, and so thank you all for your thoughts on that. I really resonated with what Dr. Chumasian said around even this notion of charity in the context of missionary work, right? That we're going to go somewhere and go solve the problems of these people, and without engaging in knowing, number one, who these people are, what their needs are, and not doing a partnership kind of effort, which I wholeheartedly agree with his recommendation. And so I am just a bit, I think that's the big piece that we got to talk about, that charity we have to be honest about what our motivations are for doing charity work. And is it to make myself these poor people, or is it that I really want to be a good force on society? So that's all I have to say about that.
And do you have any specific questions for the three panelists?
No, I think they did a wonderful job of talking about the complexity.
Okay, great. And let me turn to Dave Omar in Johannesburg. Any comments and remarks you want to make or questions you want to ask? Dave Omar? Okay, I don't think it's there or not answering anyway. What about Uti bin Yusuf?
Dr. Taj, I want to thank you for just a wonderful evening. The presentations by Rabbi Miriam and Dr. Samuel and Sheikh Selim were powerful. Dr. Salim was absolutely also, I think, very brave of what he said. I've never heard anything like this before. I do think that it got a different momentum. Whenever everybody was talking, I feel that charity appeals to a basic human instinctual reaction in our human beings of gratitude. And that feeling of gratitude, if you receive charity, can be manipulated. And according to Dr. Samuel and Sheikh Selim, into regression. It can be manipulated into something almost catastrophic. Now, about the asylum, I think you have to make another evening. Because it's...
Yes, I think it's a good, in fact, that's a great suggestion. I think we should do asylum.
Asylum seeking is almost an appeal to charity. It's from a different perspective.
Yeah, but you're right. It deserves a full session on its own because it's so wide, ranging, and all-encompassing, and we need to distinguish whether it is charity or whether we actually only perpetuating the problem. For example, if someone is fleeing the Gambia in West Africa, and because there's no jobs there, and they're all fleeing, so how does that help the Gambia? Because, shouldn't the idea be, listen, can we teach them how to fish? Whether it's growing peanuts, whether it's making souvenirs to sell to Europeans or whatever, but helping them themselves. Okay, Tanya.
I was going to say, but we often have to look at, so why are there no jobs in Gambia?
Yeah.
Usually due to some geopolitical effort, right?
Yes.
There's unrealistic work. And so I do agree with the notion that folks need to solve, it would be nice if folks could solve their problems in their home, right? So if we could empower, I think one way to help in that is to empower folks to, take control of whatever's going on in their governments, right? Boot people out, get some folks in there, do something.
Mm-hmm.
But folks often feel disempowered, and it's a hard decision for folks to up and leave their country, right? But they feel so disempowered that they feel the best option. So we have to look at this in the right context.
Perfect. Wonderful comment. Dave, Omar, I see you back on. Any comments you want to make about migrants or refugees, or better still, comment on the presentations of our three distinguished speakers? Dave, Dawood? Yeah.
Okay, I've unmuted myself. Thank you very much to all the speakers for very well presented presentations. The one thing I would like to clarify is Sheikh Salim gave the charity from the Quranic perspective. Unfortunately, majority of the Muslims look at zakat as a 2.5% charity, compulsory charity, and it's become like a taxation. It's like you're filling in a form for the receiver of revenue every year, 2%, 2.5% of your wealth. That's the one thing I want to say. And then the clergy also state that zakat can be only given to Muslims, and I'm happy that Sheikh Salim cleared the air that it can be given to anybody. The other thing is, from my perspective, the Quranic point, the viewpoint is, over and above your needs, you should distribute your wealth, but don't give so much that you will become a handout case in yourself. That's the one thing.
Do you know anyone who has done that?
No, but that's the principle. If you follow
I
the
understand, but I mean, I haven't known anyone who has wealth and had bankrupted himself, and he's on the street.
No, but I said, yeah, the concept is over and above your needs. What you need, you should hand out, but don't give so much that you yourself become a handout case, right? That's the one thing. The other thing is, I would like to ask Dr. Sam. I've had the opportunity to travel in rural parts of Mozambique, being a fisherman, and a lot of times in these little villages, I come across these Christian missionaries who are buying people's souls for a price. So they come with this donations and all that, and it's quite prevalent. Even in South Africa, it happens. I mean, if you look at the late Sheikh Didat, he started debating Christians because the Jehovah's Witnesses used to go door to door and trying to buy people's faith. And unfortunately, there's a lot of Christian missionary work that works with this agenda. I just wanted Dr. Sam's comments on this.
And we can also ask Dr. Tanya, because she also has some experience of that. And I also want to add Professor Dan, who's got lots of experience in Ghana. So these three people, to answer briefly, if I may ask you to respond to Dawood's question. So Dr. Sam, Dr. Tanya, and then and Professor Dan.
Well,
can I just be really rude and say I am an asylum seeker at my friend's house because my internet's broken and it's quite late and I think she might need
your
to
excuse.
May I be able to say goodbye? You completely inspired me and you made me want to learn more and give more and connect. It was a beautiful experience, and I'll recommend good people.
I hope you will join us again and talk about some other subject.
For sure, I will. Thank you so much to everybody.
Have a good evening. Have a good evening.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the question now to Dr. Sam, and then Dr. Tanya, and then to Professor Dan. Dawood's questions that he's seen in Mozambique, these poor villages often being, for lack of a better term, manipulated, abused by missionaries coming in to take their soul, so to speak. And I don't want to put words into his mouth, but you know what he's driving home at. And before you answer, I think the same could be leveled at what Wahhabi Muslims are doing in many parts of the world. They're doing exactly the same. So it's not just a Christian phenomenon.
All right. My simple answer will be that as a Christian, and as I read the the New Testament scriptures, Jesus in Matthew's account, Matthew chapter 5, Jesus said something, and I want to read. He said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 45, he says that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. So Jesus wants his disciples, his followers, to do good to all mankind, regardless of their religious, their tribal or racial or economic background and standing. I think if we go out to evangelize or proselyte with a view to giving them good so that they would accept our faith, then we are buying them, quote unquote. We are buying their conscience. I think we should do good. And I think I will let Professor Damabe speak, because when he lived here with me, he was a big part of a project we established in Ghana called Rural Water Development Program, which provided water wells in predominantly Muslim villages where there were no Christian church whatsoever. And we provided them water, not on conditions that they should come to church. In fact, most of the villages, they didn't even know us. They didn't know our church. But we saw the need. We went in there and helped them. And that is how it started. So if anybody goes out, whether it's a Christian or Muslim or Jewish, and gives out charity with a view to getting the people, that is wrong.
Since you referred to Professor Dan, could I just bring you in here, and then I'll go back to Dr. Tanya?
Okay, thank you, Taj. Thank you, Sam. I think I would just echo what Sam has said and what our friend Dave referred to. You know, any religious organization, regardless of the religion itself, that uses charity or aid to unduly influence people, that is unfortunate, and it's a disgrace in many ways. But many times what might appear to some people to be an undue influence might not, in fact, upon investigation, actually be that. In the Christian faith, we are compelled to do good, as Sam just read from the gospel. And this is repeated many times. And we've seen today in all of the Abrahamic faiths, we have these same principles. And so often as Christians, we feel compelled to address needs. And that's where we bring in the idea of bringing immediate relief to people's suffering. Much of what we see in the world in terms of Christian mission, benevolence down through the previous decades, much of that has been born of not only the biblical mandate and desire to do good, but also it's come out of the abundance of prosperity in many Christian countries, particularly as we call it, the Western world. It's interesting to note that as Western economies are struggling and suffering a bit, the amounts of money that Christians are putting into these endeavors is also declining. So perhaps that's just the way things flow. But the only thing I would say is, as Sam referred to, the projects that I know we together have worked in and others I've known of, being aware of this issue, we've tried to address it by making no conditions, because another thing that Jesus taught in the gospel is this. He said in Luke chapter 6, he said, do good and expect nothing in return. Nothing. He said, if somebody asks you to give or if a need, give. And he said, expect nothing in return. So that also is a Christian principle that we should seek to apply. And he said, even the right hand should not know what your left hand is doing. You know, so again, these are the same principles we've seen echoed in the Abrahamic faiths today. Perhaps Tanya would add something.
Yeah, Tanya, quickly.
I don't have anything to add because Sam and Dan are my teachers. about, this whole notion of giving and charity, and particularly in the context of mission work. So you can see why they're my teachers.
Okay, all right. I'm sure Dave's question can be mined further, but we want to start wrapping up. I want to ask Najud from Kuwait. Do you have any questions or comments about this evening's panelists? Najud? Najud? Okay, she's not answering.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Go for it.
Yeah, I would like to thank you, Dr. Taj, for hosting another enlightening seminar. And thank you to all the speakers, Sheikh Salim, Brother Sam, and Rabbi Miriam, who's not here anymore. I liked the way that charity was not just about financial, but it was also about social justice. And I think this ties in seamlessly to last month's seminar about forgiveness, because like how they were saying to forgive the trespassers, but I think also after Dr. Tanya Bryce's enlightening seminar last month, that also I think charity is also if we have persecuted people to ask forgiveness. So the onus is not just on the victim or the person who has suffered persecution, but also on the perpetrator of the crime. Charity is saying, I've done you wrong and I'm sorry. So I wonder how people feel about that.
Okay, briefly, Sheikh Salim and Dr. Sam. Any of you, Dr. Sam, Sheikh Salim, you answer Najud's question, please.
Dr. Taj, can you rephrase the question for me again, please?
Okay, let me ask the speaker to rephrase it. Najud, can you just repeat it? Najud?
Yeah, I'm saying charity is also, for example, if someone has perpetrated a crime, to apologize to the victim. It's also a form of charity to say, I'm sorry.
Okay, so here we're talking about non-monetary type of charity. So the act of contrition, of remorse, of apology, can that be interpreted also as an act of charity, Dr. Stan?
Absolutely. And I think in my presentation, I mentioned something to that effect, where in the prayer of Jesus, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Now, if I pray that prayer, what I'm promising God is that I'm going to do charity. So my answer is yes. The perpetrator of the evil owes is as a duty to God and to the victim to apologize. And when you do that, I believe it's in the broader sense an act of charity.
Okay, great. Sheikh Salim, forgiving someone, act of charity?
Absolutely. Charity is the act of doing the good that you can for humanity, and if it furthers the course of humanity, it's charity.
Okay, and then so we'll start wrapping up because 3 people haven't commented yet, and as we know in this webinar, there are no free lunches and free dinners. So there's Halima, there's Siti Salama, and Willa Finley. So let me ask Halima, any questions, comments to the speakers or anything else that you want to raise? Halima?
Yes, Dr. Taj, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you to all the speakers. It was very good presentations. Yes, charity can take all forms. It can also, if charity is in the hands of the wrong person, it can also be, or it's different actually. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Charity begins at home, as I said also.
All right, thank you, Halima. Okay, Willa Finley, do you want to say something? Willa? Okay.
Yes. Okay. Now I've unmuted myself. Thanks very much to all of the speakers. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I think all of the comments and perspectives were excellent from all three groups. They're very enlightening, and I had several maybe revelation is not the word to say, but the concept of charity being an equalizer, a leveler among all the groups. I mean, whoever, whether it's the giver or the receiver, whether it's personal or at a larger level, the objective is to equalize both parties, not to have one superior or inferior, because that's demeaning. So that was that in the viewpoint of the verse that's in the Bible's book of Acts, in chapter 20, where it says that it's more blessed to give than to receive. So there being benefits to the giver greater than that to the receiver. So so now I've been thinking, okay, is that an equalizer? Is that a leveler? Or does that speak to the need to have the giver in the position of giving without an objective, of not having an agenda, but to give freely in the way that God gives, as Sam was mentioning in the verses, God gives rain to the just and the unjust. There's also the idea in charity of on the equalization point, that there's reciprocity in that as well. Both sides benefit from that. It's not top down, as we see in a lot of missionary work, which is manipulative. There is not a reciprocity. And then I had one comment, a response, agreement with something that Tanya said about development work in other countries. And that is that because people suffer economically in many countries because of poor governance. We really can't do anything about the government. I mean, it would be nice if we could, but there are things that we can do to help people within that country, in their country, improve their situation, even if we can't do anything about the government. And as people develop their own resources and abilities within that country, they then will be able to change and do something about their poor governance.
Okay, so thank you for that. Those comments. I'm sure we could talk much longer on that. I just got a few minutes left for all of us. I just want to have a few comment from Siti Salama, and then I'm going to ask our three speakers to talk. And I'm going to ask. I know that I'm placing Marcia Raymond in a very invidious position, but since Rabbi Miriam has left, could she perhaps talk something about from the final comments from a Jewish perspective. So I'm going to ask Siti Salama now to give comments or questions, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Sam go first, then Marcia Raymond, and then Sheikh Salim to end up the meeting tonight. Okay, so Siti.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Hello to everybody. Thank you, Dr. Taj, for a lovely evening again. And thank you to the inspiring speakers that spoke this evening. I just wanted to say, I was very impressed with Rabbi Miriam's slideshow presentation, understanding more about Judaism and how closely linked it is with Islam. It was fascinating to me and lovely to read, and she's so positive and very warm in the way she speaks. And to Dr. Sam, thank you very much. I thought your presentation was very, very interesting. I like the way you word things with the different concepts of charity and giving and that sort of thing. I thought was very, very interesting. Thank you. And to Dr. Salim, thank you again for your wonderful contribution, and to everybody. I just thought it was a really interesting seminar this evening on charity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Siti. All right, so I see someone has just joined us, Rachel Berkowitz. Are you related to Rabbi Miriam?
Yeah, I'm sorry. She sent me the link and I thought she was teaching, but I think I was a bit too late.
Okay, are you linked to, are you a daughter or something?
Yeah, I'm her daughter.
All right, perfect. So were you aware of what your mother spoke about?
She showed me a bit yesterday.
Okay, so you'll have to fill in her shoes if you don't mind. We are now just wrapping up, and so since you just joined us late, we're going to do a reverse order. We're going to start with Sheikh Salim first to give his final comments. Then we go to Dr. Sam to give the Christian perspective, final comments, and then you, Rachel, will step into your mother's shoes and give your final concluding thoughts for this webinar. Okay, Sheikh Salim, the floor is yours.
Right. Okay, thank you, everybody. I wish you a good night. Before I go, Islam is really premised on the 3 points. One is I accept unconditionally. I submit to the God of the universe, the God of all creation, the merciful and the compassionate. The second thing, I establish prayer, and my prayer is where I offer God my gratitude, and my charity is where I offer my charity is where I offer humankind my gratitude. And that's where I end. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh Salim. Dr. Sam, your final thoughts?
Yeah, quickly, let me say I've enjoyed this forum, and I look forward to joining you in subsequent ones, God willing.
Come back. We'd love you to come back.
And secondly, I just want to say that looking at the whole discussion from the perspective of the scriptures, particularly the New Testament scriptures, Jesus is our example. He sacrificed his life that others may benefit, others may live. And the same is true with everyone who wants to be a faithful follower of Jesus. The last thing I want to say is a reading from the scriptures, and I read this from St. Paul's writing in the 1 Corinthians. He says, "For who makes you to be different from another? And what do you have that you did not receive? And if you did receive it, why do you glory as if you had not received it?" In other words, whatever we have is a gift from God. And we are no superior, we are no better off, because in relation to somebody else, we have and they do not have. Whatever we have is from God, and he gave it to us as his blessings, and he wants us to extend it to others who in relationship with us are less fortunate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sam. And then finally, we have Rachel standing in for her mother. Rachel, any final thoughts on behalf of your mom?
So I'm not 100% sure what this webinar was about, but I know that my mom did talk about charity.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
And that is a big part of like Judaism and the culture here in Israel. And it's one of the values that I really learned from my parents.
Yeah.
And there's a sentence in Hebrew, and it says "Tzedakah tatzil mimavet," and it means that charity will save you from death. And I think that's a very powerful sentence.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for stepping into the breach. I want to thank each of you, Rabbi Miriam, Dr. Sam, and Sheikh Salim, for your fantastic contributions. We've again gone over our allotted time, and mainly because all of you guys are suckers for punishment. You don't want to leave. And so, but anyway, the point is, I think we've all learned something tonight. I have quite a bit. We will ask, we have Dr. Sam's presentation. We'll get Rabbi Miriam's presentation. And so any of you want that, just write to our secretary, and she'll forward it on to you. And we look forward to meeting each other next month, last Wednesday of every month. So last Wednesday of October, we're going to talk about cancel culture and free speech. And I think that will be quite a hot button subject. And we would like to know what the three faiths have to say about this contemporary trend that's rocking the world at the moment. Thank you, everyone. Good night and sleep well. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for letting me see this part of my mom's life.
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.